We are just learning that several voting locations in Georgia may be staying open later. The reason for this is non-credible bomb threats were actually made at 2 polling locations. So let's go to Sarah Murray. Sarah, what have you learned about these specific bomb threats, where they were, and obviously to emphasize, it turns out they were not credible?
Right. There were a handful of non-credible threats today against polling locations. In 2 of those instances, polling precincts actually had to close for about 30 minutes to an hour while security did a sweep, confirmed that they were non-credible. We should note at all 177 polling places across Fulton County, which is where I am, though this was not one of the places affected today, there are police officers there to help address these threats. Now, Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger held a news conference earlier where he said their understanding is the threats were of Russian origin. Take a listen to what he had to say.
We've heard some threats that were of Russian origin, and so I don't know how to describe if that's viable. We don't think they are, but in the interest of public safety, you always check that out, and we'll just continue to be very responsive when we hear about stuff like that. We identified the source, and it was from Russia.
Now, the FBI is working with state and local officials to investigate this. And again, these are non-credible threats. And as I was talking to voting rights activists today, they said they don't want this to dissuade people from showing up to vote. They said it is safe for you to turn out. It is safe for you to cast your ballots. This should not disrupt folks in Fulton County from showing up and voting today, guys.
All right, Sarah, thank you very much. And of course, important to follow all of this and to emphasize how crucial that communication has been from the Secretary of State in Georgia, who Wolf has said he anticipates the possibility they can call Georgia tonight.
We shall see. Let's see what happens. Aaron, thank you very much. I want to get to our political team right now. CNN's Manu Raju, Jamie Gangel, and Nia Malika Henderson. And Jamie, you're very well plugged in. What are your sources inside the Harris campaign telling you right now? How do they feel?
So the words are cautiously optimistic. How many times are we going to hear that today? Look, they feel very good about the gender gap, reproductive rights, their ground game. There is some anxiety about Pennsylvania. That is the state that they are watching closely about voter turnout. They feel that they have done enough to compensate by getting out older voters, by getting out women. And a senior Republican actually just texted me about something that everyone needs to remember, which is Republicans who may vote for Harris in Pennsylvania. Let's remember that Nikki Haley, who is out of the race, got 16% of the vote in the Pennsylvania primary. Those are registered Republicans, 150,000 votes. If that was a protest vote against Trump, there may be, Nikki Haley has said she's voting for Trump, but there may be 149,000 extras who might consider voting for Harris.
Mano, as far as turnout is concerned, what tea leaves are you seeing?
Well, Democrats need a significant election day turnout, particularly as we've seen Republicans do better in the early voting than we saw in the last election cycle, particularly in a state like Nevada. The question, though, is that if Republicans have had some success. They've not been demonizing the mail-in voting. Trump has done a little bit of that still, but they've emphasized that more. But the question is, are those new voters Republicans have they added to it? Or are those people that are actually going to come out on election day anyways? Now, the Harris team the Democrats have spent so much time building this turnout operation, actually investing money. They've knocked on more doors and the like. Trump has relied on these outside groups to turn out voters. Is that going to be a successful tactic to try to bring in these new voters? That's a big question. Also, abortion in some of these key states. Referenda that's in Nevada, Arizona, 2 of the 7 critical battleground states. Does that impact the ultimate turnout today? That's going to be one of the big questions tonight, Wolf.
Nia, as far as early voting is concerned, Republicans voted in bigger numbers this time than they did 4 years ago. So what's the expectation now?
Listen, Republicans feel good about that, but to Manu's point, are those voters that were going to vote anyway, or are these new voters, sort of the Joe Rogan vote? That is the vote that Donald Trump is really relying on. These are low propensity male voters across all, socioeconomic and racial and ethnic backgrounds. Do they actually show up? Listen, I think if you are the Harris campaign, you feel a little bit better about the coalition you want to put together. These are older voters voters in some cases, white voters as well, women who make up a larger share of the electorate as well. And you have an issue, abortion, which has proved to be an activating and energizing issue. You saw the woman, Savannah in Pennsylvania, who said this is the first time that she's voting in a presidential election. And for her, it's all about women's rights and reproductive freedom. So in that way, you feel good about that. One of the other dynamics as well is I've heard anecdotally from a lot of black and brown voters and women as well that they wanted to wait to vote until Election Day to kind of be a part of the crowd and be a part of this historic moment in a way that they didn't feel like they could do that with a mail-in ballot or even an early ballot. So that could be something that's going on as well in terms of the dynamics on Election Day for Democrats.
Millions of Americans right now going to the polls, waiting in line at the polls. We have seen long lines in the key battleground states. This is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Tempe, Arizona, and Atlanta, Georgia on your screen. All of them lines throughout the day. In Detroit, people waiting to cast their ballot. So let's go to Michigan now, where Kylie Atwood is. She is in Grand Rapids. And Kylie, obviously, Michigan crucial. Trump just talking, saying he feels optimistic. Harris campaign also feels optimistic. What are officials saying there about how fast they will be able to count the votes?
Well, listen, the Secretary of State just today expressed optimism that they will have the unofficial statewide results here in Michigan by midday tomorrow, if not sooner. One of the main reasons for that is because they're able to pre-process mail-in ballots before Election Day. That started on October 28th, so they've been able to do a lot of the work ahead of time, with the Secretary of State saying today that puts them in an extremely good position to handle those late incoming ballots that they'll see later on today. And I want to show you just what we're seeing here at a church just 8 miles south of Grand Rapids. When folks come in, they fill out this Election Day application to vote piece of paper. Then they move over here. They check that information with the clerks who are over here. It's quiet now. I just asked people why they think that's the case, maybe because people are out eating lunch, but there has been a consistent flow of people through here throughout the day. Then they take their ballots, what they get over here, they go right over here and they cast the ballots. They pick who they're voting for, and then they put it through that tabulator. You can see that black position right back there. This is a process that's moving incredibly swiftly here at this church in Kent County, Michigan. Now, Kent County, I just want to remind folks, is a critical county for both of these contenders, for both Trump and Harris. Why is that? Because in 2016, Trump won it. In 2020, Biden won it. So both the campaigns, Harris and Trump, are eyeing this county as a pivotal county. Now, I do want to note, when it comes to the election results that we are expecting to see here in Michigan later tonight, maybe early tomorrow, maybe midday tomorrow, there have been Republicans who have seized on the possibility that, later results are reasons for questioning the process. But folks that we have talked to here, even those who are supporting former President Trump, cast their ballot for him, said that they're not worried about that they are going to trust the integrity of the process and what the results say at the end of the process.
All right. Well, Kylie, thank you very much. Maybe a result of all these questions is everyone has learned a lot about how they're counted and what ballots and what order, information that, prior to 4 years ago, pretty much no one knew. So let's get straight to CNN political director David Chalian. He has been looking at the early votes cast in Michigan, which could be a pivotal state. Any one of these could be the one that determines it, David.
That is for sure, Erin. Yeah, we were looking at the pre-election vote in Michigan. More than 3 million people, 3.3 million votes were cast prior to Election Day. I'll say that makes up about 60% of what the total presidential vote in Michigan was in 2020. We don't know what the total vote will be this time, and that's what's key when you're looking at this pre-election vote. We need to learn about the Election Day vote to get the whole picture. But of this 3.3 million, we do see a gender divide. There's no doubt about it. Women participated at a greater rate than men did in the pre-election vote. 55% of the pre-election ballots cast in Michigan were cast by female voters, 45% by male voters. That's a 10-point advantage there for women in terms of casting a ballot. But compare that to 4 years ago, Erin, it's slightly a narrower gap than we saw 4 years ago in the pre-election vote in Michigan. That was a 12-point advantage towards women, 56% to 44%. So as more Republicans and clearly more men have participated in pre-election voting in a place like Michigan, you see that margin narrow a little bit, which gives each side information about what kind of voters they need to turn out on Election Day itself, Aaron.
All right, David, thank you very much.